everyone. Today we're going to be doing an experiment that studies different types of matter. So first I want to begin by making sure that everyone has either printed out or downloaded a copy of the ELED experiment sheet. So this worksheet we'll be using throughout the entire experiment. It's important that you be writing or typing on this document to keep down all your thoughts. And the other document, I've also linked the PDF to a story by Dr. Seuss, which is Bartholomew and the Oobleck. So this is page 14 and 15 of the PDF, and that'd be great if you guys could get that out beforehand, before we start, just to have it up because we will be reading this piece, and you can also read it after the experiment's over. So back on the main topic, before we begin, I just want to review some main ideas and vocab for this experiment. So basically there are the three primary states of matter, which is a liquid, gas, and solid. These three types are most well known for solids being desks, people, a pencil, banana, window, sorts of objects like that. Liquids can be recognized as oils, blood, milk, juice, and mainly water. And then gases are the most well known, even for us as well, is oxygen, which obviously we use to breathe every day. That keeps us alive. And actually, so water is one of the liquids that is also can be turned into a solid and a gas. So in its liquid state, it's known as water. In its solid state, it's known as ice. And then when it is warm, when it's heated, it's turned into a gas vapor, which is pretty interesting. And so also just going over the experiment, it's a big vocab. We just want to go over the fact that we are going to be using the scientific method throughout this entire experiment, working on our observations, hypotheses, predictions, analyzing results, and then obviously finding a conclusion to our experiment. So before everything, we just wanted to talk about what is Oobleck? What is it? Have you heard of it? Have you not heard of it? Oobleck is a name created by Dr. Seuss in his book that I have shared the PDF, the Bartholomew and the Oobleck. And so I just want to give you little context. So if you come to page 14-15, we're going to read this side of the book. So you guys get a little bit, and then you can read the rest of it after the experiment. So, for a moment they stood thinking, blinking their creaky eyes. Then they spoke a word, one word. Oobleck. Oobleck, asked the king. What will it look like? Won't look like rain, won't look like snow, won't look like fog. That's all we know. We just can't tell you anymore. We've never made Oobleck before. They bowed, they scattered toward the door. We go now to our secret cave. On Mystic Mountain, Necca save. There, all night long, we'll work for you, and you'll have Oobleck when we're through. They'll do something crazy, whispered Bartholomew. Call them back, your majesty. Stop them. Stop them? Not for a ton of diamonds, chuckled the king. Why, I'll be the mightiest man that ever lived. Just think of it. Tomorrow, I'm going to have Oobleck. So you guys can finish that story from the PDF. That gives you a little bit more about the whole story of Oobleck. So now on to the experiment. I just want to introduce some of the materials that we will be using. And so I've already given all the materials and the instructions for you guys prior to this chat. So you guys can follow along at home. If you need an adult's help, that is more than welcome. Or siblings, that would be great, because sometimes it can get a little bit messy. So right now, we have a bowl. You need cornstarch. You need water. And this water is just yellow because I added some food coloring, which is optional. You need some measuring cups. You can use gloves, which are also optional just because, again, it does get messy, along the lines of also newspaper or sort of parchment paper to cover your table. And then the testing objects that we will be using. So for this experiment, we are using a die, marble, a penny, a paperclip, and a toothpick. So we're using those 5 testing objects. And so I've already made my oobleck beforehand, just because it takes a little bit of time to get mixing in. But for those of you at home, if you want to pour in your food coloring, if you're using it, into the water, stirring that up, and then putting 1.5 cups of cornstarch into your big bowl, letting that sit there, and then slowly pouring your water in, folding over the mixture, and making it sure that it's thick enough, like pancake mix, that it should be like that consistency. So next, I also want you guys, as you're mixing your bowls, if you're doing this at home, to take out your oobleck experiment worksheet. And so after we've just already gone over the materials, and now that your oobleck should be somewhat of a pancake consistency, I want you to observe it. I want you guys to look at it. I want you guys to kind of see the shape, maybe move it around the bowl a little bit, see how it moves. For example, mine, I chose yellow. So I have a yellow oobleck mixture. And so you just want to kind of look at it. Think about what we talked about earlier about the states of matter. Is it a solid? Is it a liquid? Is it a gas? Use your prior knowledge, and you want to use that ideology and those big main ideas to think about what could this be. So after we have these observations in the back of our mind, we're going to make a hypothesis. So just a reminder that hypothesis is an educated guess based on your observations. So based on our observations, we want to make a hypothesis about what state of matter oobleck is. Is it a solid? Is it a liquid? We know it's not a gas just because it's not taking up the larger part of the air we breathe. So even though gases can contain their shape, this looks either more of a solid or a liquid. So we have solid, liquid, could be both, or it could be neither. I want you guys to write out your hypothesis in the blank, right in the lines for the first step right here. And then after you decide your hypothesis, we're going to jump right in to the next activity, and we're going to do some predictions with our test objects. So with these 5 objects, we are going to predict whether each object will sink or float in the oobleck. So I want you yourself to think about these objects. If you don't have these objects at home and you're using other free range objects, that's totally fine. Just write down what your object is and your predictions and your results, so you know what objects floats or does not float for your experiment. So for these, we're going to go over a paperclip, a toothpick, a die, a marble, and a penny, just as a reminder. And so for these objects, I want you to circle the float or sink, and think about also, what are the materials made of? Is it plastic? Is it glass? Is it made of copper, or is it made of wood? You want to think of how heavy they are. Some marbles are obviously, or any of these objects can be heavier or lighter from your household to mine. But in general, use your prior knowledge. Kind of think about how heavy these are, what are they made of, and how they might be affected in the oobleck. So after these predictions are all done, we are going to hop right into the results. So we're actually going to do the experiment right now. So with everything, all your test objects laid out, you're going to first place in the paperclip. The paperclip, we're going to put it right down in there. And if you see, it completely disappeared. So we know that the paperclip sinks. So you're going to circle sink, and we're going to move on to the next object. Next is the toothpick. So again, we're going to watch the toothpick, see if it floats or sinks in the oobleck. And we notice that this object floats. So we're going to circle float for that option. Next, we're going to do the dice. So we're going to plop that in and see how this goes. Where it might be a little bit difficult to see in my bowl, the die definitely went all the way to the bottom of the bowl, and it is not floating. So we're going to consider that sinking. Now, if you flip onto the back side of your worksheet, we are going to do the marble. So I'm going to place the marble in, and see if this sinks or floats. So again, like the die, it has sunk to the bottom. So we're going to put that under sink. And last but not least, we have the penny. So we're going to place the penny in and see if it floats or sinks. And that quickly sunk right to the bottom. So now these are our results. We have 1 floater and 4 sinkers. With these sinking and floating objects, why were they different? Why are they the same? I want you to think about your hypothesis, think about your results, and maybe think why this happened. This is also going to be the part where you either use gloves or your fingers. Now I want to give you the chance to kind of play around with it. I want you to run your fingers through it. I want you to hold it. When you run your fingers through it, you notice that it's more liquidy than anything. But when you pick it up and move it from hand to hand, it becomes a solid. But when you let it go, it becomes instantly liquid. This is because the pressure that you're using, oops, toothpick fell out. This is because the pressure that you're using makes it a solid. And when you let go of that pressure and that force, it becomes a liquid. So if you're constantly holding in that ball of oobleck and then you let it go, it becomes liquid and it floats away like this. And it sinks all the way back in. It's like very gooey. So this is also why some objects float and sink. Obviously, weight does have a some sort of it has a weight on it. But if this entire oobleck was solid, then all of the objects would be sitting on top because it's solid and there would be no need to sink. But because it is both a solid and a liquid, that means that allows some of the pieces to drop lower and to sink and some to float on top. So now that we're going back to the last question, we're going to see, what was your hypothesis? Did you think it was a solid? Did you think it was a liquid? Did you think it was both? Or did you think it was neither? And I want to see why or why not you thought that was right, and why or why not you see that is now both or neither a solid nor a liquid. So oobleck is actually known as a non-Newtonian fluid, which has properties of both a solid and a liquid. So you can't clarify as that one solid and one is a liquid, because they are both or neither at the same time. So and this is because how the cornstarch reacts with the water. So it does not combine completely to be a liquid. And when the material is held with that force, as I said before, when you're moving it back and forth with your hands, it's very hard. And that's why it does not, it's not completely a solid, because when you let go of that force, it quickly becomes a liquid because the two, cornstarch and the water, do not congeal correctly. So then this was kind of the end of the worksheet. And I want you now to kind of just have fun with this. Play around with it. Use different materials around your house if you've already used your 5 objects. It's very interesting to try to see which objects do float, which ones do sink. Even just kind of messing around with the difference in texture. Try to feel the solid. How solid is it really? How liquidy? How fast maybe? How long can you keep it in your hands until it turns into goo? And if you could not do this experiment with me now, and you don't have the resources right now, there's no worries, because I am also going to link all the instructions for you so you can do it at another point in time when you can get all the resources. So, as long as you guys have finished your entire worksheet, both back and front, answering all the questions and circling your predictions and the final results, I will be collecting those for assessment. Thank you guys for the great experiment.